The village of Durnat had always lived under the shadow of an ancient and cruel tradition. Every year, without fail, the lottery took place. No one knew exactly when or why the ritual had started, but it was said to keep the village safe from a terrible curse. The people believed the lottery was the price they had to pay to survive. Those who questioned it either disappeared or were forced into silence. The fear of the unknown kept everyone obedient. Layla, a 22-year-old woman, grew up with this fear. She had seen her own mother taken by the lottery when she was just a child. The image of her mother's face, drawn and pale as she walked towards her doom, haunted Layla's dreams every night. Her father never spoke of it, but Layla knew the pain weighed on him too. It was something no one talked about openly. Everyone just pretended it was normal. As the lottery day approached, the village became tense. The normally quiet streets were filled with whispers, and people avoided making eye contact. It was as if the air itself was heavy with dread. No one knew who would be chosen this year, and that uncertainty was what terrified them most. Layla spent her days with Harun, the one person who made her feel safe. Harun was brave and kind, and he hated the tradition just as much as Layla did. He often spoke about running away, leaving the village behind, and starting a new life somewhere far away, where they would be free from the lottery's grip. Layla loved him for his courage, but deep down, she feared that escaping was impossible. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Layla and Harun sat together near the edge of the village. The soft glow of the setting sun couldn't chase away the dark thoughts in their minds. "I can't stand this, Layla," Harun said, his voice full of frustration. "Every year, we lose someone, and for what? No one even knows if the curse is real. It's madness." Layla stayed silent, her eyes fixed on the ground. She wanted to believe in Harun's words, but the fear of the unknown was like a heavy stone in her chest. What if the curse was real? What if leaving the village would only bring more danger? Harun reached for her hand. "Layla, we can leave, you and me. We can run far away before the lottery. Safiye from the next village told me there's a way out. She helps people escape." Layla's heart raced. She had heard of Safiya, a woman known for her defiance of the village's traditions. It was said she had lost her family to the lottery and now lived to help others escape the same fate. But leaving would mean betraying everything she had ever known. It would mean leaving her father behind, her home, and the life she had lived for so long. "I don't know, Harun," Layla whispered. "What if we get caught? What if the curse is real?" Harun squeezed her hand tighter. "We can't live in fear forever, Layla. This isn't life. This is survival. I love you, and I can't bear the thought of losing you to this madness. We need to fight back, or we need to leave. There's no other way." Layla looked into Harun's eyes, seeing the determination there, but she also saw the fear he tried to hide. The lottery was just days away, and they were running out of time. Could they really escape? Could they leave behind everything they had ever known for a chance at freedom? Or would they be caught and punished like those who had tried before them? As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, the shadows in the village grew longer. The lottery loomed like a dark cloud, and Layla's heart pounded with uncertainty. She knew one thing for sure: nothing would ever be the same after the lottery. Whether they stayed or tried to escape, their lives were about to change forever. The night before the lottery was always the longest for Layla. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her small room, the shadows dancing across the walls in a way that made her heart race. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind felt amplified in the silence of the house. She couldn't shake the fear gnawing at her stomach. As dawn broke, the village began to stir. The sun rose slowly, casting a golden hue over Durnat, but for Layla, there was no warmth in its light. She could see her father moving about the house, his face a mask of resignation. He had lived through the lottery many times, and each year chipped away at his spirit. It hurt Layla to see him this way, but she felt powerless to change anything. Later that day, Layla met Harun in their usual spot at the edge of the village. His face was drawn, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He had been up all night, organizing a plan with Safiye and a few other villagers who wanted to stand against the lottery. "We have to do this, Layla," Harun said, his voice a mix of fear and determination. "If we don't, we're just waiting for our turn to be sacrificed. We need to show the others that we don't have to accept this anymore. Layla felt a surge of hope at Harun's words. For the first time, she saw a way out, not just for herself, but for the entire village. They spent hours discussing the plan. They would gather everyone in the village square after the lottery and speak out against the tradition, urging them to join the rebellion. As the day wore on, Layla's anxiety grew. What if the villagers didn't support them? What if they turned against them? The fear of the unknown loomed larger than ever, but she felt the weight of her mother's memory pushing her forward. She didn't want to lose another loved one to the lottery. That evening, as the sky darkened and the stars began to twinkle, the village square filled with the usual crowd. The air was thick with tension and fear. Layla clutched Harun's hand tightly as they stood together near the front. Mr. Summers, the lottery official, arrived with the black box, and the villagers fell silent. "Let's begin," Mr. Summers announced, his voice steady. He seemed to relish the control he held over the crowd, but Layla felt something different bubbling beneath the surface this year. A sense of defiance. As the names were called, a chilling sense of dread washed over her. The atmosphere was heavy, almost suffocating. Each slip drawn from the box held the potential for death. Harun squeezed her hand, a silent promise that they would stand together no matter what happened. Then came the moment of truth. The name Hutchinson was called, and Layla's heart dropped. Tessie Hutchinson? A lively woman who often brought laughter to the village stepped forward. She looked terrified, her eyes wide with panic. As she reached into the box, Layla felt a wave of compassion. No one should have to go through this. After Tessie drew her slip, Mr. Summers told her to open it. Layla held her breath as the crowd waited in anticipation. When Tessie revealed the black spot, a gasp echoed through the villagers. It was real. It was happening again. Then, something unexpected happened. Tessie began to protest. "It isn't fair. You didn't give us enough time to choose," she shouted, her voice rising in desperation. Layla could feel the energy shifting in the crowd. There was anger, disbelief, and something else. Defiance. Suddenly, Harun stepped forward. "Tessie's right. This tradition is wrong. We can't keep sacrificing each other for an old superstition." His voice rang out, cutting through the tension like a knife. The villagers turned to stare at him, their expressions a mix of shock and confusion. "Who are we kidding?" Harun continued, his voice gaining strength. "We're not safe because of this lottery. We're just repeating the same mistake year after year. We need to break this cycle." Layla's heart raced as she saw the fire igniting in the eyes of some of the villagers. She stepped forward, emboldened by Harun's words. "My mother was taken by this lottery. I won't let it take anyone else I love. We have the power to change this." With every word, the crowd shifted. Some whispered in agreement, others looked hesitant, but the tension had transformed. It was no longer just fear. It was rebellion. Suddenly, a shout erupted from the back of the crowd. "What do we have to lose?" It was Sophia, standing tall and fierce. "We've lost too much already. If we don't stand together now, we'll lose our lives next." As if a dam had broken, more voices joined in. The villagers began to shout their agreement, echoing Harun's words. "No more. We want change. Break the tradition." The energy surged through the crowd, electrifying them with hope and determination. But just as it seemed like they might truly break free, Old Man Werner shouted, "This is madness. You'll bring doom upon us all." His voice was frail, but the fear in his eyes showed how deeply rooted the tradition was in him. The villagers paused, uncertainty flickering in their faces. Layla felt the moment hanging by a thread. Would they back down, or would they finally take a stand? Harun stepped forward again, this time with urgency. "If we're going to do this, we need to act now. Let's destroy the box. Let's put an end to this, once and for all." The crowd erupted into cheers, and Layla felt the adrenaline surge through her veins. They were all on the brink of something monumental. She turned to Harun, their eyes locking in shared determination. With a fierce energy, the villagers rushed towards the black box, knocking it over and scattering the slips of paper into the air. The sound of tearing paper echoed in the square, a powerful symbol of their rebellion. In that moment, Layla knew they had crossed a line. The tradition that had held them captive for generations was crumbling, and with it, their fear began to fade. But she also knew that the battle was far from over. There would be consequences for their actions, but together, they had ignited a spark of hope in Durnat. As the night deepened and the villagers began to celebrate their newfound freedom, Layla felt a mix of joy and fear. They had taken a stand, but they were still vulnerable. The rebellion had begun, but would it be enough to truly change their fate? The day of the lottery had arrived, shrouded in a thick veil of tension and uncertainty. The sun rose, but it brought no warmth to the hearts of the villagers in Durnat. Instead, it illuminated the shadows of doubt and fear that had settled over the town. Layla woke up with a knot in her stomach, knowing today was a test of everything they had fought for. In the early morning light, Layla helped her father prepare for the lottery. He moved about the house in silence, his face drawn and tired. It pained her to see him so defeated, yet she understood that today could be different. Today, they had the power to change everything. As she set the table for breakfast, she felt a mix of hope and dread, unsure of what the day would bring. As the villagers began to gather in the square, Layla spotted Harun. He was surrounded by a small group of supporters, people who had joined their cause after the rebellion. They had seen the importance of standing against the lottery and were determined to make their voices heard. Harun looked up and caught Layla's eye, offering her a reassuring smile. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "I think so," Layla replied, though uncertainty lingered in her heart. "What if they don't support us when it matters most?" "Then we keep pushing forward," Harun said, determination in his eyes. "We've already come so far, we can't turn back now." The village square was bustling with activity as families gathered, the tension palpable in the air. Children ran around, oblivious to the weight of the moment, while adults exchanged nervous glances. The black box sat ominously in the center of the square, a silent reminder of the tradition that loomed over them like a dark cloud. As the lottery began, Mr. Summers called for silence. His voice echoed through the crowd, sending shivers down Layla's spine. "Welcome, everyone. It's time for the lottery. We all know the rules. Each family will draw a slip from the box, and whoever draws the marked slip will face the consequences." The crowd murmured, fear lacing their words. Layla watched as the villagers approached the box, their hands trembling as they reached inside. Each slip they pulled out was a potential death sentence, and the thought sent chills through her. When it was time for Layla's family to draw, her heart raced. Her father stepped forward first, his hands shaking as he pulled a slip from the box. He opened it, and to their relief, it was blank. Layla let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Next was her brother, Amir, and he too drew a blank slip. The tension in Layla's chest eased slightly, but as the lottery continued, she could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Finally, it was Layla's turn. She stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. As she reached into the box, she felt the eyes of the villagers on her, heavy with expectation and dread. Pulling out a slip, she hesitated, her hands trembling as she opened it. It was blank. Relief washed over her, but it was short-lived as she turned to see Harun standing nearby, his face a mix of hope and anxiety. He had been fighting for change, and she wanted to believe they could succeed. As the drawing continued, the atmosphere shifted. Families held their breaths as the slips were revealed one by one. Then came a moment of shocking betrayal. Tessie Hutchinson's name was called again. The crowd gasped, and she stepped forward, panic etched on her face. "Tessie, you've drawn the marked slip," Mr. Summers announced, his voice calm despite the chaos that erupted in the crowd. Leela's heart sank. Tessie had protested before, and now she was at the center of attention again. "No, this can't be happening," Tessie cried, her voice rising in desperation. "I can't be chosen. I have children." Layla felt a pang of empathy. Tessie's words struck a chord deep within her. It could have been her family, her mother, or anyone she loved. Yet Old Man Warner's voice cut through the commotion. "We've always done this. You're bringing doom upon us, Tessie. Accept your fate." As the villagers began to close in around Tessie, Layla felt a sense of urgency. She could see the fear in Tessie's eyes, and it mirrored her own. The anger that had fueled their rebellion began to bubble back to the surface. "Stop! This isn't right!" Layla shouted, her voice rising above the crowd. "We can't just let this happen again. We have to stand together." But the villagers were divided. Some shouted in agreement, while others turned their backs, afraid of the change Layla and Harun were advocating. The division in the crowd grew palpable as some villagers advanced on Tessie, while others hesitated, caught in a struggle between tradition and rebellion. Then, in a moment of shocking betrayal, Layla's father turned to her, his face filled with disappointment. "Layla, stop this nonsense. You're putting us all at risk. Don't you understand the importance of tradition?" Layla was taken aback, hurt piercing her heart. "Dad, it's wrong. We can't sacrifice anyone else. We need to fight back." But he shook his head, his expression hardening. "You're being foolish. This is how we survive. We need to keep the tradition alive." Tears filled Layla's eyes as she felt the weight of her father's words. This was the man she looked up to, the one she had thought would support her in this fight. Now, he was turning against her. Before she could respond, the crowd surged forward. Tessie, now terrified and desperate, was surrounded. "It isn't fair," she screamed, but the cries fell on deaf ears. The villagers, driven by fear and tradition, began to gather stones. Layla's heart raced as she realized the brutal truth of the moment. "We can't let this happen," she yelled, running towards Tessie. Harun followed close behind, urging others to join them. In the chaos, Layla felt an unexpected burst of courage. She reached out to Tessie, grabbing her hand. "You don't have to go through this. We can fight back." But the crowd closed in around them, and Layla could see the determination on their faces. They were ready to carry out the lottery's cruel outcome. The stones were raised, ready to be thrown, and the air crackled with fear. Then, as if time stood still, Harun shouted, "No more. We can't let fear control us. We have the power to change this." His voice rang out with conviction, and for a moment the villagers hesitated. Some lowered their stones, their expressions wavering. But then, the voice of Old Man Warner broke through. "You're all fools. You'll bring doom upon us. We must keep this tradition." Layla felt the fear seep back into the crowd, and her heart sank. The struggle between rebellion and tradition was at its peak. The villagers were trapped in a cycle of fear, unsure of how to break free. In that moment of chaos, Layla made a choice. She wouldn't let Tessie face this alone. With a fierce determination, she shouted, "Tessie, run! Get out of here!" But Tessie, paralyzed by fear, couldn't move. The crowd pressed closer, and the stones began to rain down. Layla watched in horror as the villagers acted on the twisted tradition that had gripped them for so long. The weight of betrayal settled heavily on her heart, the realization that her own father, her community, had turned against her ideals. The chaos escalated, and as Tessie cried out, the crowd closed in, the sound of stones hitting flesh echoing through the square. Layla felt her heart shatter as she realized that the change she had fought for was slipping away, buried beneath layers of fear and tradition. With tears streaming down her face, she turned to Harun, his expression a mix of anger and sadness. "We tried," he said, voice thick with emotion, "but they aren't ready, not yet." Layla nodded, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. They had fought valiantly, but the darkness of tradition was still too strong. As the village fell back into silence, the chilling realization washed over her. They had lost a battle today, but the war was far from over. As the crowd dispersed, Layla knew she had to find a way to reignite the fire of rebellion. They couldn't let fear win. They had to keep fighting for the freedom they deserved, even if it meant facing the darkest parts of their community. The lottery had revealed the betrayal buried within their traditions, and while it had brought them to their knees, Layla was determined to rise again. The rebellion had just begun, and she wouldn't rest until they shattered the chains of tradition that bound them. The aftermath of the lottery left a deep scar on the village of Durnat. As the dust settled, Layla stood frozen, her heart heavy with despair. The cries of Tessie Hutchinson echoed in her ears, a haunting reminder of what had just transpired. She felt a mix of guilt and anger. Guilt for not being able to save Tessie, and anger toward the villagers who had blindly followed a cruel tradition. As the crowd dispersed, Layla turned to Harun. His face was pale, the spark of rebellion dimmed by the weight of what they had just witnessed. "What do we do now?" she asked, desperation creeping into her voice. "We need to get out of here," Harun replied, determination seeping back into his tone. "We can't stay in a place that will continue to sacrifice its own. We need to find others who will join us in this fight for change. Layla nodded, her heart racing at the thought of leaving everything behind. The village, with its familiar streets and faces, had always been her home, but now it felt like a prison, a place where lives were taken in the name of tradition. Together, they made their way through the empty streets, the sun hanging low in the sky, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets of despair. As they reached the outskirts of the village, they spotted a small group of villagers who had gathered in hushed tones. "What are they talking about?" Layla whispered, curiosity getting the better of her. Harun strained to listen. "It sounds like they're discussing the lottery and what happened to Tessie," he replied. "We should hear what they have to say." Creeping closer, they could make out snippets of conversation. "This isn't right," a woman was saying, her voice shaky. "We can't keep doing this, we have to stand up for what's right." Another voice chimed in, "But Old Man Warner says we'll bring doom upon ourselves if we stop. What if he's right?" Layla felt a spark of hope. "They're questioning the tradition. Maybe there's still a chance," she whispered to Harun. "But are they ready to fight?" Harun replied, his brows furrowed in concern. "Fear runs deep in this village. We can't trust that they'll act." Layla's resolve hardened. "We have to try. If we can get even a few of them to join us, we can make a difference." With newfound courage, they approached the group. "Listen," Layla began, her voice steady. "We need to talk. What happened today can't continue. We have to fight back together." The villagers turned to her, a mix of fear and curiosity in their eyes. One of them, a man named Rahim, stepped forward. "You want us to fight against the lottery? After what just happened?" "Yes," Layla replied, her passion igniting the air around them. "If we stay silent, it will only happen again. We have to stand together and say enough is enough. We need to escape this cycle of violence." Some villagers exchanged uncertain glances. "What if Old Man Warner hears us? He'll make sure we pay for our betrayal," a woman whispered, fear evident in her tone. "Then we'll be ready," Harun said, stepping forward. "We'll create a plan. We'll find a way to escape this tradition and live freely." A sense of unity began to grow among them, and slowly more villagers started to nod. "I'm with you," Rahim said, determination sparking in his eyes. "We can't let fear control us any longer." As more villagers joined their ranks, Layla felt hope blossom in her heart. Together, they began to devise a plan for their escape. They decided to meet later that night to finalize their strategy and prepare for the journey ahead. When night fell, the village was cloaked in darkness, a shroud of secrecy wrapping around their meeting. They gathered in a hidden clearing just outside Durnat, the moon illuminating their faces. Layla looked around at the determined faces of her neighbors and felt a surge of strength. "We need to move quickly," she said, her voice firm. "We'll head towards the forest. It will provide cover, and we can make our way to the neighboring village. They might be more open to change." Harun spoke up. "We'll need to be careful. Old Man Warner has eyes everywhere. He'll know if we try to leave." "We'll have to split into smaller groups," Layla suggested. "That way, if one group is caught, the others can still escape." The villagers agreed, and they started forming their groups. Layla felt a sense of urgency and excitement build within her. This was their chance to break free from the shackles of tradition. As they prepared to leave, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Old Man Warner, his presence looming ominously over the group. "What do you think you're doing?" he sneered, his eyes glinting with menace. "You think you can just leave? You're turning your back on our way of life." Panic spread through the villagers as they turned to Layla and Harun for guidance. "Stand strong," Layla shouted, trying to keep the group together. "We're taking a stand against the lottery. We won't let fear dictate our lives any longer." Old Man Warner's laughter echoed through the clearing, cold and bitter. "You'll regret this. Tradition is all we have, and you'll pay dearly for trying to defy it." With that, he vanished back into the shadows, leaving behind a chilling sense of dread. The villagers exchanged fearful glances, but Layla refused to let their spirits wane. "Do not let his words scare you," she urged. "This is our chance to change everything. We can't back down now." With her rallying cry echoing in their hearts, the villagers gathered their courage. They moved quickly into the dark embrace of the forest, the trees closing around them like guardians of their newfound freedom. But the escape was not without its challenges. The forest was thick and winding, filled with unknown dangers. The further they went, the more disoriented they became, and the weight of their decision pressed down on them. After hours of trekking through the dense woods, Layla and her group stumbled upon a clearing. They paused to catch their breath, their hearts racing with both fear and excitement. "What if we don't find the neighboring village?" one woman whispered, her voice trembling. "Then we'll figure it out," Harun said, trying to reassure them. "We can't give up now. We've come too far." As they gathered their strength, a chilling realization dawned on them. They were now fugitives, hunted by the very community that had once been their home. Layla felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. They had stepped into the unknown, leaving behind a life filled with pain and darkness. But as dawn broke, casting light through the trees, they heard rustling in the distance. "What was that?" Rahim asked, his voice tense. "Stay quiet," Layla whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. They all held their breaths, straining to listen. The rustling grew louder, and suddenly, a group of villagers emerged from the trees, led by Old Man Warner. "You thought you could escape, didn't you?" he sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. "You'll pay for your betrayal." Fear surged through Layla's veins, but anger ignited her spirit. "We won't let you stop us," she shouted, stepping forward. "We're no longer your pawns. We're taking back our lives." The villagers behind Old Man Warner hesitated, caught between fear and loyalty. They had seen the change in Layla and her friends, the bravery that had ignited within them. "You're fools to turn against your own," Old Man Warner yelled, rage spilling from his lips. "Tradition is what keeps us strong. Without it, you'll lose everything." "Tradition has only brought us pain and death," Harun shouted back, his voice steady. "We refuse to let fear control us any longer." The standoff between the two groups reached a boiling point. The air crackled with tension, and the villagers stood at a crossroads, torn between old loyalties and the desire for change. Finally, one villager stepped forward, his face a mask of resolve. "I won't be part of this anymore. We have a chance to change our lives, to live without fear. I choose freedom." As he spoke, others began to step forward, breaking free from the chains of tradition. One by one, villagers joined Layla and Harun, their courage ignited by the possibility of a new life. Old Man Warner's face contorted in anger as he realized his grip on the villagers was slipping. "You'll regret this. You're turning your back on everything we've built." But the momentum had shifted. The villagers were done with fear. They were ready to embrace change. With renewed determination, Layla rallied them. "We're going to find the neighboring village and build a new life, together." As they turned away from Old Man Warner and the oppressive weight of tradition, Layla felt a surge of hope. They were finally breaking free, united in their quest for a brighter future. They moved swiftly through the forest, each step echoing with the promise of change. The sun shone brightly above, illuminating the path ahead. Though challenges lay ahead, Layla knew they had taken the first crucial steps toward freedom. The journey would be long and fraught with uncertainty, but together, they would navigate the unknown and reclaim their lives. With every heartbeat, they left behind the shackles of fear, stepping boldly into the dawn of a new beginning. As dawn broke over the horizon, Layla and the villagers pressed onward through the dense forest. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the ground. There was a sense of urgency in their steps, a mix of excitement and anxiety about what lay ahead. They had made the decision to break free from the lottery and the horrors of their past, but the unknown was a frightening companion. After hours of walking, they finally emerged from the trees into a clearing that overlooked the neighboring village of Ashwood. The houses were neat and well kept, with children playing in the streets. It looked peaceful, a stark contrast to the turmoil they had left behind. "Is this where we will start anew?" Rahim asked, his voice a blend of hope and uncertainty. Layla took a deep breath, feeling both exhilarated and terrified. "This is our chance," she replied, her heart racing. "We can make it here, but we need to be careful. They might not be welcoming to outsiders." As they approached the village, they noticed a few curious glances from the villagers. Some looked worried, while others appeared indifferent. Layla felt a knot form in her stomach. Would they be accepted here, or would they face the same rejection they had known back in Durnat? They decided to head to the village square, where a bulletin board was filled with notices. As they walked, Layla overheard snippets of conversations. "Did you hear about Durnat?" one villager whispered. "Something strange is happening over there." The word sent chills down her spine. Had Old Man Warner spread tales of their rebellion? Was there still a threat looming over them, even in this new place? "We need to find someone who can help us," Harun said, breaking her thoughts. "Let's ask around and see if we can find a leader or someone in charge." Layla nodded, and they approached a small group of villagers standing near the bulletin board. An older woman with kind eyes noticed them and smiled warmly. "Hello, travelers. You look like you've come a long way. What brings you to Ashwood?" Layla stepped forward, her heart pounding. "We've come from Durnat. We fled from the lottery and the violence. We're looking for a place to start over." The woman's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "The lottery? I've heard rumors. It sounds dreadful. You're safe here, but we have our own traditions and change is not easily welcomed." "Please," Harun urged. "We just want to live in peace. We've seen too much pain already." The older woman looked thoughtful. "I'm Clara. I can help you find shelter. But I must warn you, Ashwood is a tight-knit community. Not everyone will be as understanding as I am." As Clara led them through the village, Layla felt a flicker of hope. They passed friendly faces and bustling shops. The scent of freshly baked bread wafted through the air, and laughter echoed in the streets. Perhaps this was the new beginning they had longed for. However, Layla's hope was tempered by anxiety. What if the villagers were as resistant to change as those in Durnat? What if they turned them away? After a few minutes, Clara stopped in front of a modest house with a garden full of colorful flowers. "This can be your home for now. It's not much, but it's safe. You can stay here while you figure things out." "Thank you, Clara," Layla said, gratitude flooding her heart. "We'll do our best to fit in and contribute." As they settled into the house, Layla felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She looked around at the others who were unpacking their belongings and trying to make the place feel like home. "We need to earn their trust," she said to Harun. "We need to show them we're not a threat." "Agreed," Harun replied. "But we also need to prepare for any backlash. Old Man Warner may try to reach us here." Days turned into weeks as they adjusted to life in Ashwood. At first, things went well. They worked alongside the villagers, sharing their skills and stories. Layla discovered a talent for baking, and she spent hours in the kitchen, making bread and pastries that quickly became popular. But as time passed, whispers began to circulate. Some villagers were not as welcoming as Clara had been. They looked at Layla and the others with suspicion, remembering the stories they had heard about Durnat. One evening, as Layla was closing up the bakery, a group of villagers approached her. They were led by a tall man with a stern expression. "You think you can just come here and forget what you did in Durnat?" he accused. "We don't want your kind in our village." Fear gripped Layla's heart, but she forced herself to stand tall. "We didn't choose what happened in Durnat. We were victims of a terrible tradition. We're here to escape it." The man scoffed. "And how do we know you won't bring that tradition here? You're nothing but trouble." Just then, Clara appeared, her expression firm. "Stop this right now. They've done nothing wrong. They're here seeking a new life, just like any of us once did. We should be helping them, not pushing them away." The tension in the air crackled as the villagers exchanged uncertain glances. "You may feel differently, Clara, but some of us have our doubts," the tall man replied, his tone cold. As they walked away, Layla's heart sank. They were still seen as outsiders, and the shadows of their past lingered over them like a dark cloud. Would they ever truly find acceptance? In the days that followed, the villagers grew more divided. Some supported Layla and her friends, while others spread rumors, fueling fear and distrust. The tension in Ashwood escalated, and Layla felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. "We need to confront this head-on," Harun suggested one night. "We can't hide in fear. We have to show them that we're not a threat. We need to organize a gathering, share our story, and let them see who we really are." Layla nodded, her heart racing at the idea. "Yes, if we share our experiences, they might understand. We need to show them that we're just trying to escape a nightmare." The next day, they began to spread the word about a gathering in the village square. Layla felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Would anyone come? Would they be willing to listen? As the sun dipped low in the sky, villagers gathered around the square, some curious, others skeptical. Layla and Harun stood before them, their hearts pounding. "Thank you for coming," Layla began, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. "We're here to share our story, to show you who we really are. We come from Durnat, where we lived under the shadow of the lottery, a tradition that took lives and left our hearts shattered." The crowd listened, some with frowns and others with expressions of disbelief. Harun continued, "We didn't come here to bring chaos. We fled to find safety, to build a life where we wouldn't have to fear for our loved ones. We want to be part of this community, to share our skills and our hearts with you." As they spoke, Layla noticed some villagers leaning in, their expressions softening. A woman in the front row had tears in her eyes. "I can't imagine what you've gone through," she said, her voice trembling. "You're brave for coming here." But just as hope began to blossom, the tall man from before stepped forward, his face twisted with anger. "You think we should trust you? You're still tied to that terrible tradition. We don't need your kind ruining our village." His words sent a ripple of tension through the crowd. Layla's heart sank. "We're not here to ruin anything," she pleaded. "We're just seeking a chance to live freely." The crowd wavered, caught between fear and empathy. Clara stepped forward again, her voice strong and steady. "We all have a choice to make. We can either embrace change or learn from one another, or we can let fear divide us. This is a moment for Ashwood to show what it truly stands for." Slowly, murmurs of agreement began to spread among the villagers. Layla felt a spark of hope ignite within her. "We want to build a new future together, where no one has to live in fear. Please, give us that chance." As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the square, a woman stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "I lost a friend in Durnat. She was brave, like you. I think we should give you a chance to show who you really are." A wave of agreement swept through the crowd. The tall man scowled but remained silent, clearly outnumbered. Layla felt tears of relief welling in her eyes. "Thank you. We promise to work hard and earn your trust." With newfound resolve, the villagers began to talk among themselves, sharing stories and laughter. The walls of suspicion began to crumble, replaced by a sense of community. But as the gathering dispersed, Layla felt a lingering unease. Old Man Warner had not given up easily, and she sensed he would not rest until he tore their newfound peace apart. That night, as she lay in bed, the weight of her past and the uncertainty of the future kept her awake. What if Warner and his followers retaliated? What if the past they had fled from caught up with them again? In the quiet of the night, Layla made a silent vow. No matter the challenges ahead, she would fight for this new beginning. She had already faced the darkest shadows of tradition, and she wouldn't let fear dictate her future. As dawn broke the next day, Layla stepped outside, ready to face whatever lay ahead. She was determined to turn this new beginning into a true escape from the curse of the lottery. Little did she know, the road ahead would test her in ways she could never imagine. Please like the video and subscribe the channel and click on bell icon.